Hey, it's Louise Hvala and you're watching another episode of Gatehouse Insights. And today I'm joined by Racky, who is the Director and Principal Lawyer of LL Gold and Board Director of Channel 31 and Victorian Amateur Football Club. Laura, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thanks for having me.
So I firstly wanted to start off with your legal career story, looking at your first role and the positions you've held and how it's led you to commencing LL Gold.
Sure. It's a bit of a long story. So in my first year at university, I landed a job as a court officer in the federal court and I just loved it. I got to spend day in, day out, sitting in courtrooms, listening to argument. I think I spent more time in courtrooms than I did in lecture theatres in the first few years of uni. And that was a really good eye-opener, I think, to start my career, to see that the law wasn't just legislation or citing paragraphs from cases, that it was really important to think about how a judge was going to see a clause in a contract or something like that. So that's where I started off, and then I moved into a sole practitioner firm. I worked as a paralegal, a lot of conveyancing work in that role, and this was still while I was at university. And that was, again, really good broad experience, especially I think from a property law perspective. It's really important, I think, for junior lawyers to understand how property works, contracts, all of that sort of thing. So that was fantastic. And then my articles year was at Maddox, and I was in the insolvency and restructuring team at Maddox, and there for the first few years of my career. Decided I wanted to try top tier, moved to Allens for a couple of years. That was fantastic. Back into mid-tier, then a couple of years in-house at Liberty Financial, and now I've 6 months ago opened the doors to this place, to LL Gold. So here I am.
It's fantastic. Did you ever think you would commence your own practice one day?
Do you know what? I don't actually think this was ever something on my radar until the last few years. I think, especially because of the work that we do as lawyers, it takes a lot of experience and learning to get to a place where you think, okay, I'm ready to run my own show. So it wasn't something that came into the plans, no.
Yeah. So you've worked both in top tier and mid-tier firms. Can you provide your personal insights into the differences between each environment?
Sure. I think both really have their strengths and weaknesses. I moved into top tier because I wanted the exposure to the more complex and larger litigation and insolvency matters. So that was sort of a really deliberate choice for me to be exposed to that sort of work, especially as I was becoming more senior in my career. And I absolutely got that experience. But obviously what comes with that are different demands and expectations. So demands from within the firm, from your clients, it is a different playing field, I suppose. Again, what comes with that is strong support networks, administrative support within a bigger firm. You've got more junior lawyers working with you. There are more resources, I would say. Then from more the mid-tier perspective, I suppose what you would get out of that is a much broader experience, especially as a junior, where you get a bit more face time with clients, I think, and you might get the opportunity to, say, be the only junior on one matter with a partner, and you get to be across the whole matter rather than, maybe a lot of top tier juniors, I think, get put on more discrete sections of, say, a proceeding, say discovery, and they miss out on that broader experience. So I think they're both very different. I think they are good for lawyers in different times of their career. Yeah.
Touching on that at different times of their career, if someone was at a mid-tier firm, when would you say go and try top tier, and when would you say to someone at a top tier firm, come try mid-tier?
Oh, that's a really tough one.
It is.
I think it's all really individual, obviously. The other thing to keep in mind is depending on the life cycle of the work that you're doing. So I specialised in insolvency and restructuring, and my articles year was sort of in the height of the GFC fallout. So my mid-tier experience was really great. I got to work on fantastic matters because a lot was happening in the industry at that time. So I think that factors in as well. Yeah. I think it's hard to kind of be categoric about these things. For me, having had the experience of gone from, say, a sole practitioner firm and then into a mid-tier firm, I loved that from the junior perspective. I think it meant that there were days where I had to run down to court and file things and understand how things worked, because there wasn't somebody else to do other parts of that job. You're it. And then from the sort of top tier perspective, I liked that once I got there, I had a wealth of experience under my belt. You know, I'd done further education, you know, masters. I had done a specialty course in insolvency. So I came into that experience far more knowledgeable and experienced, and I could get a lot out of the top tier world. So I think it's really individual, yeah.
And you've also worked both in private practice and an in-house role. For you, how was the transition from private practice to in-house, and how was the day-to-day experience different?
Well, it was a real eye-opener, coming from, you know, many years in private practice, and it didn't take me long to have that aha moment of, no wonder clients find us so difficult sometimes. You know, I think we forget what it feels like for a client to be working with a lawyer, and once you get dropped into a business, you know, everything just gets tipped upside down. And I think just from a really practical point of view, you're not sitting in an office at another end of town or in another city from your client. They know where you sit, they come and find you. Your clients want the advice then and there, and they expect you to be an all-rounder. They don't think that you only have a sort of narrow area of expertise. So that's something to be managed. But more generally, the way that the advice needs to be delivered has to be different. It's just a totally different ball game from being in private practice. You don't get given a very discrete set of instructions and asked to provide advice on that. You might be just very aware and conscious of the business's overall strategy, and you're asked to issue spot anything in the life cycle, say, of a new product or something along those lines. So I found that really interesting and exciting, and a huge revelation for me as a private practice lawyer going into in-house, yeah.
For you, what was the attraction going to in-house?
I think I started, as I became more senior in my career, to get really interested in business. You know, it's one thing to love the law and the application of the law, but the more you get to actually work with people on a day-to-day basis, and you see this whole other world that is happening out there in business, and this might frighten a whole heap of lawyers, but you know, what you realise is that our clients are doing business every day without us. You know, they're not getting us to document it, we're not reviewing it. The wheels just turn, and I think that we forget that sometimes as lawyers. So I just became really curious about how business works. You know, a law firm is a very different beast to a business in another sense. So it was just that want to learn something new, be in a different environment, and apply my skills in, you know, the way we're always talking about commerciality, and we're better to learn that than in a commercial business.
Yeah. Tell me, other than technical legal skills, which is a given,
yeah,
what are some other skills lawyers need to be a highly regarded in-house lawyer?
There's some really, I think, specific skills and learnings from being in-house. Something that became very apparent to me early on is that your clients in an in-house setting don't want to hear a no. You know, it's just not good enough to be asked, can we do this? And be told, here's the 10 reasons why not. You actually are expected to find a pathway to either the intended outcome or something very similar. So if what is the business wants to achieve is roadblocked for whatever reason, you know, you've got to come up with a path through it, not just a no. So I think that's a really important lesson. The other thing is for lawyers to be really cognizant all the time about the risk profile of what they're being asked. So, you know, things that the business doesn't see as a significant risk. That all has to be borne in mind when you're giving advice. You have to put things in context, Again, putting up roadblocks where there might be a risky path, not illegal, risky, is okay if you're in a business where there is an appetite for that risk, and your job in-house is to explain the potential risks and then give the business an opportunity to work with you to find out what risks they're happy to take on and which ones they're just not, rather than again saying, this is the absolute no and this is the only way that we could do this. It's all about finding that middle ground where, I think people forget that we're experts in the law, but our clients are experts in their business, and it's giving them that opportunity to actually be seen to understand the implications, and you've just got to explain it to them and let them work through it with you. Another thing that is really important for in-house lawyers to remember is that if they're not always thinking about the broader business and the strategy of the business, the advice might be wrong. So not technically wrong, but giving advice in a vacuum on a question that is brought to you that doesn't take into account other things that are going on in the organisation can kind of trip you up, especially when you're dealing with a very big business that might have different teams and departments. They don't understand, or they may not be aware of other moving parts in the business, and that's your job to know those things so that you can make sure that there is an overlay of strategy and overall business strategy when you're giving advice. Something else that is really hard to get out of the habit of when you're a private practice lawyer is ditching the long letters of advice. I get it. I love writing those letters. I think a lot of lawyers really do, because we do find the law and case law really interesting, and that's why we do what we do. But we kind of have to leave those for our internal memos when we're in-house, and that doesn't mean that we're not expected to do that work. I think in-house lawyers and their clients expect that detailed, in-depth consideration has taken place. It's not to say you lose the opportunity to sit and read cases and write and come to those conclusions, but a really good in-house lawyer keeps that to one side, gives the shot glass, what I like to call the shot glass version of the law, and then moves to options, possibilities, paths forward, considerations, risks, not Lord Denning in, 100 years ago said this. Look, sometimes, there's really interesting cases that clients do love to hear about, but it's important to kind of keep that out. Clients just don't have time to read that, and they're not interested. They just want to know, can we do this? Can't we do this? How do we do it? And then the very last thing I'd say is you'll know when you've made it as a trusted advisor in-house work when you become a drop-in centre for any and all queries, and not just legal queries. You actually want to be a person in the business that is considered to be a strategic mind. That, when people lead into, look, I don't think this is a legal question, but what do you think about this? You can say, okay, I've won the hearts and minds here and I'm getting it. I think that's really, really important. So, not shirking from having those strategic discussions about business issues that might not be strictly legal, because actually that's the best place for an in-house lawyer to be really in the business. Yeah.
How long would you give a lawyer making that transition to in-house from private practice? How long would you give them, or how long would you say, look, you need about this many months to get up to speed with the business and to leave some of your old habits from private practice behind?
I think the quicker the better.
Yeah.
Obviously, I would say that if you're not kind of there in 3 months, and you're just really uncomfortable with how you got to run as an in-house counsel, then maybe it's not for you. I'm not saying that it's impossible, or that if it takes you longer, then you're not ever going to be a good in-house counsel. But I think to be a really good in-house counsel, you've got to be able to be uncomfortable a little bit and shake the sort of very strict confines of working in a private practice and be okay with it. And Look, I think it's fair for some lawyers to say, that's just not for me. I like writing those long letters of advice. I like things being more structured, and I like the really technical side, and I want to do that every day. But in-house is really for lawyers who want to be challenged and be on the run and go outside the scope of what they've done before, I think. So I'd say how long is a piece of string? It's one of those, but if it's not sitting right, then maybe it's not the right path. Yeah.
Now, you're not just a lawyer, you're also a board director of a couple of companies. For you, what was the decision to obviously become a director on a number of boards, and how has your experiences shaped your legal career?
Sure. I really have always liked giving back to the community, and I think that the best way to do that for all of us is to find what our really unique skill set is and use those skills to help and to give back. So, I've been part of the board at Channel 31 for some time now, and we're going through a really, huge transitional period, and it's been kind of like looking behind the curtain for what it is that affects the not-for-profit on the day-to-day, the operational stuff that often lawyers, we're very blinkered from. We don't see the day-to-day. We only see the escalation. Say if you're a litigation lawyer, you only see when things go really wrong. But just being able to see from kind of start to finish in a really holistic way how an organisation like that runs is just a huge eye-opener, and it gives you insight when you're working with your clients that you actually understand the things that are keeping them up at night, and you actually understand how your advice in one area might feed through into another. And then I've also been involved in the Victorian Amateur Football Association more recently, and look, it's just a really exciting time for football at the moment. We've got a women's competition that started this year with 1,200 women playing in our first year. So that is like a huge achievement. So these are really challenging, exciting roles, and you get to work with just really passionate, wonderful people. And I find it personally really rewarding, and it flows through to your work because, like I said, you're seeing behind and you're actually getting a really great oversight and overview into how a business works. And us lawyers sometimes forget that. We get very focused on the question at hand. But if you can bring all your knowledge in, that advice you can give can be much stronger.
Now, I'm curious to know, and I know our audience is curious to know as well, how did you get these board positions?
So look, both of them actually were advertised. They were both advertised roles. There are some times at play, networks and touching base with people who are within these organisations to get some insight and before you go to interviews and meet people, I suppose. So there was no magic in either of these appointments, and I think I read recently sort of an article about how to be a young female board member, and it made me quite cross because I thought, well, it's not anything special to be a young female board member. You're just a board member, and I think a lot of people seem to think there's this sort of glass ceiling or this magical thing that you need to do, whereas really it's just knocking on doors and talking to people and applying and finding roles where your skills and expertise are going to be useful. There's a lot of not-for-profit organisations out there that can really do with the experience of lawyers, and so I think it's just asking, putting your hand up, getting that experience under your belt on boards. There's no magic to it. Yeah.
Now I'm shifting us to your new business, LL Gold. Tell us a little bit more about it and the type of work you're doing and the clients you're servicing.
So moving from the private practice to the in-house sphere, like I said, was a real eye-opener to me, and I saw what it was that drove clients crazy about their lawyers. I thought, I get it now. And what became really clear to me was that there's a lot of small to medium businesses that could really do with a general counsel type service, but maybe it's not in the budget for them to hire somebody. So also pay top tier law firm fees. And so what I wanted to do was find a real interim solution, sort of in-between solution, that would give businesses this fantastic in-house experience, which means that they've got a lawyer who understands all of their business and they're not just jumping in and out for transactions or when something goes wrong. Someone that is consistently part of their business. And so that kind of was the main driver for LL Gold and why I created the General Counsel office offering. And you know, it was a leap of faith. It was one of those things that I just thought, if not now, it's never. You've got to do it. And you talked about, oh, did you ever think that you were going to do this? And it's at the point where you are comfortable operating, I guess, without the parachute of a partner or a general counsel. It's that, you know, you've got to get to that point, because although you can always pick up the phone and speak to colleagues and people at the bar in your network to bounce ideas off, the buck stops with you. And so you do have to take that real leap of faith. So far, look, you know, it's been over 6 months now. It's going really, really well. Our clients are loving the General Counsel offering in particular, because they're getting to know one lawyer, you know, and on the flip side of that, I love it. I get to work with these clients who are doing so many cool things, they are passionate, driven business people that are building awesome businesses, and I just feel privileged to be able to go in and spend time with them every week and see what they're doing. And it means I can issue spot. It means that there's consistency of advice. All the advice fits in with one. You know, each bit of work is not in a vacuum. It's, well, hang on, didn't we talk about this 2 months ago? Remember when we were doing that transaction and we said that next, you know, it's that kind of advice that these clients are getting, and I think that was missing in the market a little bit. You know, law firms can be very transactional. What's the advice? Here's the fees for this advice, and then we kind of leave you to it. Whereas having a general counsel office means for these clients that they've got a lawyer on call when they need them, and they feel really comfortable. They feel like we get it. We actually get their business, and they can pick up the phone at any time, ask the non-legal questions. Oh, you know, and I get those a lot. Laura, look, this is not legal, but we're just trying to make a call about how we play this deal, or what do you think we should do here? And it's at that point, you know, you've gained your client's trust, and you can build a really great relationship. So I'm loving that LL Gold is growing kind of together with a lot of these clients who are in similar stages of operation. So I think the goal that I set out to achieve was to give that real hybrid offering, and it's working really well for the clients that we've got. Yeah.
I love it. I love the whole concept.
Yeah.
For me personally, having just someone on call,
Yeah.
knowing my business inside and out, and even just from the strategy point of view, sometimes you're sitting there and just to bounce
Yeah.
another idea off someone else is really good.
Yeah.
So congratulations
Thank
on
you.
launching. It's
Thank you.
amazing.
Thank you.
Before we wrap up, I wanted to get your advice for younger lawyers and even mature age lawyers on planning their careers.
I suppose some sort of top tips. I think it's never too early or too late as a starting point to build your networks. So, early on, that network will be your peers, and it will grow, and over time your networks will include your clients. And I think when doing that, it's really, really key to always be thinking about how you can work and support and help your networks, not about what my network can do for me, what I can do for my network, and always thinking about the people in your network that you can link up with one another. You know, it's really rewarding, and it does over time create this fantastic base upon which you can launch, a more significant senior career. I think the second thing is that, a lot of lawyers get really fixated on firms, titles, seniority, and obviously I've moved in the course of my career into different roles, and every time it has been because There's been an opportunity to learn on the other side, and that's why I've jumped. So rather than be fixated on these sort of, more high level things, look at yourself, look at where you want to be in 5 or 10 years, knowing that, the path will probably change, but think about what are the key skills and learnings that you need as a lawyer to be fantastic, to be excellent when you're ready, and go and find the places that will give you the opportunities to learn those things, rather than where's the fastest progression, or what looks great on my CV. All those things are wonderful, but at the end of the day, you take you everywhere you go, not the law firms or the titles. So, if you can focus on the skills and the learning, I think that puts you in a really good place. And that, I guess, leads to the next thing, that you're always learning, whether you're junior or very, very senior. So, hindsight is a wonderful thing, but just like many junior lawyers, I used to get endlessly frustrated at things more senior lawyers or partners would want me to do with work, on files, or approaches they wanted to take, or things that they were just really regimented about. And at the time, it drove me mad. I think, why are they doing it this way? It doesn't make sense, and I want to do it my way. But you know what, now I'm ready to do it my way. I can actually look back and say, oh, now I know why that was so important. And I think junior lawyers particularly miss a lot of learning by thinking that they know best. And it's only when you're much older that you can go back and say, oh, okay, that senior partner really was very good at their job, and they were in that role for a reason, and I had a really great opportunity to learn. And so I look back now at my career and I think about all of those people and all of those experience, and I think, wow, thank goodness I learnt those things along the way. That never stops. The next group of people that you learn from are your clients. You learn about business strategy, but also what they need, what they want. You can't just assume that I'm the lawyer and I know best. Actually, like I said before, your clients are experts in their business, and you've got to give them that and work with them when you're giving advice. And so I suppose, sort of from an overall, more kind of holistic approach, lawyers early on can think that their job is just about applying the law, looking at legislation, cases, facts. But really, it's about people, it's about storytelling, it's about, being malleable and creative and thoughtful in your approach. And so I always think that if you can get really good at knowing what people want and what people need, whether it's your clients or, the other party in a litigation, then you might be at base camp, you're on your way.
Laura, thank you so much for being here, and congratulations once again on launching LL Gold.
Thank you very much.
Now, Laura and I would love to hear from you. What is the biggest insight you're taking away from today's episode? Comment and share below, because I know others will benefit from what you have to say. If you like this episode, I'd be ever so grateful if you subscribe to our channels and share this video with your family and friends. And thank you so much for watching another episode of Gatehouse Insights, and I'll catch you next time.